cold hands on the ring. The chapel smells of old wood and wilted flowers. She stands beneath the rafters, veil pinned tight, breath thin. Pews creak with townsfolk in Sunday clothes. Money sits up front, memory in the back. Her fingers tremble over the gold circle on a velvet square. Boots scrape the aisle. Spurs hush the whispers. The poor cowboy she once ignored steps through the doors, hat low, jaw set, eyes on her like a question he has carried too long. The rich fiancé smiles like a man who has already bought the day. The pastor stalls. The bell rope swings and taps the floor. She hears her mother's tired advice. Marry for quiet. She hears the sheriff's radio. She hears her own heart say no, while the room wants yes. The fiancé lifts the ring between two careful fingers. It flashes weakly in the dusty light. Don't, she whispers. Say the word, the cowboy says. Son, the fiancé murmurs. This is private. Nothing's private in a town this small. A murmur rolls. The bell rope sways. A baby fusses and is carried out. She thinks of the well behind her father's house, the one she fell into as a girl. The one the cowboy hauled her from with a rope and a curse. She thanked him, then turned away the next summer when he asked for a dance. Do you love him? The cowboy asks. She cannot make a sound. The silence answers for her. The fiancé's smile tightens, then smooths like a politician. We have guests, the fiancé says. We have a program. We have a life to ruin if this goes wrong, the cowboy says. The pastor flips his book to stall. She notices the patch on the cowboy's shoulder, the scuff on his cheek. She notices the fiancé's bright cufflinks stamped with a brand that isn't his. You're late, she says. I had to finish burying a calf, he says. And the truth. The fiancé laughs. What would you know about that? I know what your men did to her brother's field, the cowboy says. Fires don't start by themselves in wet spring. Gasps prick the air. Careful, the fiancé says. Let's take a breath. The pastor says. No, the cowboy says. She hasn't had one in months. Her knees go hollow. She remembers the smoke, her brother with a bucket that did nothing. The fiancé brought water trucks and a photographer. He held her shoulders for the picture and told her to smile, because hope sells. Later he bought her a dress and a ring and said they would rebuild in the right way. You think money fixes? Everything, the cowboy says. Money gives order, the fiancé says. Order gives safety. Safety for who? For her, the fiancé says. Eyes on her, like a claim. No more leaks. No more waiting on weather. No more fear. No more voice, the cowboy says. She wants to laugh and cannot. The pews exhale. The bell rope taps like a nervous tail. Say it plain, she says. Why are you here? Because you look like someone drowning, the cowboy says. Because I have stood at that well twice now. Because you like being needed, the fiancé says. Because I love her, the cowboy says. Quick and soft, as if the words are a bandage he has finally torn free. The room tilts. Simple words strike. The fiancé turns to the crowd with calm he practiced. Friends, he says. This man is confused. I'm not, the cowboy says. Tell me you don't love me, and I'll go. Her mouth will not shape the lie. She thinks of nights on the porch with the fiancé listing roads and boards and names on plaques. She thinks of the cowboy's truck, the cracked seat, music loud and honest. She thinks of her father's hand on her head when he died, a blessing and a weight. Look at your family, the fiancé says. They need you to choose, right? Look at yourself, the cowboy says. You need you. Let's return to the vows, the pastor says. Don't say them, the cowboy says. Say them, the fiancé says. Everyone breathes in the shape of a verdict. The sheriff steps to the door. Dust turns in the light. Her fingers hover over the ring, cold and bright and heavy at once. She wants proof, a sign. Tell me one true thing, she says, looking at each of them. I will build your name on every door, the fiancé says. I will build your name in my mouth, the cowboy says. Her hand shakes harder. The town waits. The chapel creaks. She remembers her mother's ring, lost in the well, never found. Some things sink when they are supposed to shine. I can't answer, she says. The silence answers for her. The bell gives one soft knock against the wall. She feels every ice stack weight on her spine. The pastor lowers his book. The cowboy doesn't blink. The fiancée keeps smiling, practiced, certain. Her hand hovers over the ring. Altar split. The air holds steady while faces tilt and blink, as if time were a stalled clock and only eyes still moved. She keeps her hand above the ring like it could burn. Old families sit in clean coats, their looks sharp as hooks. The sheriff stands by the door, badge catching a thin line of light. The bell rope sways though, no wind comes. The fiancée's father sits in the front pew with his spine like a fence post. He nods once at the sheriff. She thinks of his fields, square and neat. Choose, the fiancé says, voice clear enough to cut bread. That's not love, the cowboy replies. Son, step down, the sheriff warns. You step down first, the cowboy fires back. She breathes. I can't do this. You can, the cowboy says. You just won't. The pastor lifts his hands. Friends.com. Muttering travels along the pews. She's lucky, someone says. She's foolish, another says. The bell rope touches the wall and the floor in a slow rhythm, like a heart misfiring. She feels two lives pulling from her ribs. One is paved and bright. One is dirt and rain. The fiancé moves closer, careful not to touch. I won't ask again, he says. This is the moment. The cowboy steps as well. No apology, only history. You're pressing her like a thumb on a bruise. She's safe with me, the fiancé says. She was safe until your men lit that field, the cowboy says. Her head fills with gray heat. Smoke pushes into her old memories. The sheriff shifts his boots, and the floor complains. Sheriff, the fiancée's father says, low and clear, restore order. Order's a tidy word, the cowboy says. It covers messes. Enough, the sheriff says. This is a church. It is also a ledger, the cowboy says. Count the front rows. She thinks of the well behind her house, the stone lip worn smooth by hands that had to draw water, even when the ground was mean. She sees herself at that well in two dresses. One silk, one cotton, both heavy. Look at me, the fiancé says. Breathe. Take the ring. Look at me, the cowboy says. Breathe. Tell the truth. Her voice won't divide itself into words. She looks at the pastor. If I say yes and I'm wrong, what happens to the part of me that knew? It learns respect, the fiancé says. It turns into a ghost, the cowboy says. It rattles the windows. Stop, the sheriff says. The fiancée's father folds his hands. People are waiting. People can wait, the cowboy says. She thinks of the sheriff's late wife, how the singing left his house when she died and the scanner took its place. She wonders what leaves a house when you choose wrong. Choose, the fiancé says again. Not like this, she says. Then when, he asks. When the room isn't a jury, the cowboy says. The pastor tries again. Take a minute in the back. If she steps out, she won't come back, the fiancé's father says. Maybe she won't want to, the cowboy says. Boy, the sheriff says, softer. You're standing where you shouldn't. I'm standing where truth is owed, he says. She sees the sheriff's hand flex near his belt and hates the thought. Please, she says. No, nobody wants trouble, the fiancé says. You brought trouble when you brought your father, the cowboy says. The bell claps once, flat as a palm on a door. A baby cries in the vestibule. She pictures the ring as a small door that only opens one way. Behind it are quiet halls, clean counters, a voice that calls her sweetheart in public, but not at home. Behind the other life are tires on gravel, storms on the roof, a laugh that pulls grief loose. The fiancé watches her hand like a farmer watching rain. "Take it," he says. "Let me make this right." "You can't make right what you started wrong," the cowboy says. "Allegations," the fiancé's father says. "Matches don't strike themselves in mud," the cowboy says. She feels her family's house lean in her chest, boards dark with memory, the well bucket still damp. She hears her brother in the yard, calling for more water that never cooled the fire. She wonders if a vow could rinse that. "Think of the future," the fiancé says. "Think of your soul," the cowboy says. "Think of the peace of this town," the father says. She closes her eyes and finds none of those things. She finds a girl at the bottom of a well, looking up at a circle of sky, waiting for a rope, and a boy throwing it down without asking for thanks. She opens her eyes. The rope in the chapel swings and taps the wall again. "Sheriff," the pastor says, "help us stand still." The sheriff draws one long breath that scrapes his ribs. He lifts his hand toward his holster. It is not a draw, only a threat. The whole congregation sucks air and holds it. Badge and bell, the badge glints, while the bell swings and the air tastes like iron. She holds her hand above the velvet square, trying to pause a second that refuses to obey. Faces shift. Time does not. The fiancé smiles for the room, not for her. The cowboy doesn't blink. The sheriff speaks soft, the way men do before rain that might flood a low road. "Folks," the sheriff says, "let's keep the peace." She hears her pulse strike wood. "The peace was sold," the cowboy mutters. "Sold to who?" the fiancé asks, eyes still kind enough for the crowd. "You know the price," the cowboy says. She thinks of smoke that wouldn't listen to water, and of a camera click that made grief useful. She remembers a well and a rope and a night with no moon. She sees the ladder of men who run this county, rungs polished by habit and fear, and the gap she would vanish into if she climbed wrong. The sheriff shifts his boots. Leather whispers. The pastor clears his throat, book half raised. The bell rope taps the wall as if counting sins. "Ring down," she whispers to the pastor. He lowers the book. "Child, decide," he says, voice rough with dust. The fiancé's father does not move. His nod lives inside the sheriff's eyes. Power tastes like a nail held in the cheek. She swallows, and it stays. "Let's not drag this," the fiancé says. "People are patient until they feel mocked. People feel mocked when money talks for them," the cowboy says. "I'm offering safety," the fiancé says. "No more fires. No more men at the gate. No more waiting on weather. Safety for your plans," the cowboy says. "For the county line you want to own." A murmur rolls like dry beans in a pan. She thinks of a night with no moon and the rope that burned her hands when she climbed. She thinks of the boy who held it and said, "Don't tell your father. He'll blame the wrong person," and how true that sounded in her bones. The sheriff raises his palm, eyes front. No one moves. His tone is calm, but the space around his holster has its own weather. "We can finish like neighbors." "Neighbors don't buy sheriffs," the cowboy says. The sheriff takes that and sets it aside, slow. "Watch yourself, son. Watch your badge," the cowboy says. The fiancé turns to the pews. "This is not a trial," he says. "This is a promise." He turns back to her and softens. "Take the ring," the cowboy says. "Tell the truth first." She feels both sentences grip her ribs in opposite hands. She looks at the pastor. "If I choose wrong, what happens to the part of me that knew?" The fiancé answers, "It learns respect." The cowboy answers, "It turns into a ghost and keeps knocking." The bell swings harder, clapping once, like a heart misfiring. "Enough," the sheriff says, softer, as if speaking to a skittish horse. The fiancé's father finally speaks. "End this." He doesn't raise his voice. He never has to. She tastes that iron again and remembers the well behind her house. The bucket lip worn smooth by palms that did not quit even when water came up mean. Sold to who? The fiancé repeats, smile thinning. To you, the cowboy says, with smoke as a receipt. Allegations, the father says. Mud makes stories. Mud holds prints, the cowboy says. She wants to run, but the aisle is long and the town is longer. The sheriff's gaze settles on her like a heavy coat. We keep the peace, he says. Let the lady answer. She tries. I can't do this. The cowboy says. You can. You just won't. The fiancé says. You're scared of freedom. I am offering structure. You mean a fence around her voice, the cowboy says. She studies the fiancé's careful hands, the way he measures every inch of the moment for the crowd. She studies the cowboy's scar and the truth sitting behind his teeth like a tool he will use even if it breaks him. Do you love him? The cowboy asks again, low enough to be for her alone. She cannot speak, so the room speaks for her. The murmur lifts, then hush. The sheriff rubs his jaw and looks tired enough to break. Folks, he says, eyes up. The bell rope trembles and knocks, small and stubborn. The pastor holds his book like a shield that forgot how to save people. Think of the future, the fiancé says. Think of your soul, the cowboy says. Think of the town, the father says. She thinks of the ladder, the well, the moonless night, and a girl coughing up dirt while a boy held her steady. She thinks of a camera flash and a donation envelope and the way applause can feel like chains. Ring down, she tells the pastor, louder now. He nods. Child, decide, he says. Final, as a door closing. The sheriff's hand settles near his belt. Not a draw, just a warning. The fiancé lifts the velvet ring box and opens it under the church light. The gold shines, sure, waiting like a sealed road. Everyone leans, gravity almost changed. The first refusal, she steps back before the ring can touch her skin, and gasps slice the air. Old women cross themselves in ways that don't match any book. Men fold their arms as if bracing a gate. The ring stays in its box, bright and small, while the sheriff's badge keeps its thin line of light and the bell rope sways as if counting. She feels two lives slide across her ribs in opposite directions. It hurts like a pulled stitch. She thinks of the well behind her father's house, the raw stone lip, the rope that burned her palms the night with no moon. She tastes iron and hears the pastor's breath snag. The fiancé's father tilts his chin toward the sheriff like a signal sent through old habit. The fiancé keeps smiling for the room, not for her. The cowboy does not blink. He stands with history on his shoulders and dust on his cuffs. I'm not ready, she says. Her voice comes cracked, but firm. You are, the fiancé insists, smooth for the pews. She's not property, the cowboy cuts in. Watch your tone, the father growls. Watch your hands, the cowboy says. The sheriff says, enough. Silence pulls tight. The pastor lowers his book to his chest. The fiancé's smile thins, a sheet of ice no one should walk on. We can step out, he tells her. We can make this gentle. Gentle isn't honest, the cowboy says. Honest isn't kind, the father replies. Faces tilt. Time stutters. The bell claps once, and the baby in the vestibule hiccups and quiets. The cowboy turns as if to leave, a test with boots on. She feels the pull in her ribs, the sudden hollow where his back would be if he went. Go then, the fiancé says, cool and soft, and let her choose peace. The cowboy doesn't look at him. He keeps his eyes on her like a rope held steady. Say it, and I'm gone, he says. She swallows iron. I won't be rushed, she says. You're not rushed, the fiancé's. You're rescued? From who? The cowboy asks. From bad weather and small men, the fiancé says. From fires that start themselves, the cowboy says. A murmur moves across the room, old debts waking. The fiancé's father rises with neat dignity. Friends, he says, let us keep our dignity. He nods toward the sheriff, as if the man were a lever he could pull without standing. The sheriff doesn't move, but the air near his holster feels crowded. You needed our trucks when your field burned, the father adds. You needed our fence money when the wind tore your wire. We needed neighbors, the cowboy says. We didn't need men who bring cameras when they bring water. Laughter flickers, then dies. The father's face flattens. She breathes dust that only lives in churches and old attics. She sees her mother's dress on a hanger in a dim room, yellowed lace and patient thread. She hears her brother's laugh from before the fire and feels his hand on her shoulder the night after, heavy as a quilt. The fiancé steps closer, careful not to touch. I will rebuild that land, he says. I will put your name on the sign. I will keep you safe. Safe from what? She asks. From people like him, he says. The cowboy laughs once, without joy. People like me pull you out when you fall in, he says. She tastes that truth and steadies. Enough, the sheriff repeats, softer now, as if speaking to a skittish mare. This is turning. It already turned, the cowboy says. The father's gaze does not blink. Watch your words, he says. Watch your reach, the cowboy says. The fiancé looks hurt on purpose, a face shaped for rooms like this. I love you, he says. Then hear me, she says. I'm not ready. The words land and stand. Old women bow their heads as if a page has turned. Men clear their throats. A window ticks as heat shifts. The bell rope taps the wall twice and rests. The pastor tries once more. Child, you can step aside and think, he says. Thinking is all she's done, the father says. Action is due. Her action is hers, the cowboy says. The fiancé's jaw ticks. This grandstanding ends now, he says. Walk with me. No, she says. He blinks, stunned that a small word can close a door. No. No, she repeats, and here's the well in it, the scrape of the bucket, the rope sliding, the promise she made in the dark too. Never hand herself away for quiet. The sheriff shifts, and the floor complains. Ma'am, he says to her, almost kind, we can clear the room. Don't, she says. Let them see. She looks at the cowboy. He has turned a full step away, ready to leave with his pride intact and his heart in pieces. She feels the test like heat near a stove. Stay, she says. His shoulder eases, just a breath. The fiancé's the word and hides his anger in a sigh. This is spectacle, he says. This is choice, she says. It doesn't need to please you. It needs to be right, the pastor answers, tired. She turns to the pews and sees faces she's known since the first grade. Widows with tight mouths, ranch hands with dust on their cuffs, the clerk from the feed store, the deputy with a new wedding band. She feels how the town holds its breath when power is at play. She thinks of houses that smell like memory and bleach. She thinks of men who break and keep working. She thinks of the well, the rope, the night with no moon. Her voice steadies. I'm not property, she says. I don't belong to a plan or a photo. Choose dignity, the father says. Choose safety, the fiancé says. Choose truth, the cowboy says. She looks from one to the other. I choose myself, she says. The words taste strange and clean. The bell gives a soft clap and swings back. The father steps forward. Watch your tone, he says. Watch your hands, the cowboy says. The sheriff says, enough. The word has less weight each time. The fiancé lifts the box again, as if more light could change her mind. I said, I'm not ready, she says. You are, he answers. You don't hear her, the cowboy says. You don't own this, the father says. She's not for sale, the cowboy says. The room breathes out, then holds its breath again. The bell claps once, like a heart that skips and warns. She looks down the aisle. It seems longer than when she walked in, like wood can stretch to keep a person where she doesn't belong. She takes one step anyway. Dante, the fiancé, says, "I won't beg in public." "Then you won't beg," she says. "You'll listen." "To foolishness," the father says. "To myself," she answers. She takes another step. The town parts slowly, unwilling to miss the show. No one touches her. No one speaks. The cowboy's boots don't move. The sheriff watches and doesn't stop her. The bell rope ticks against the wall and hangs back. The pastor closes his book with a small sound that feels like winter. A final murmur skims the pews. Someone whispers that she regret this. Someone else whispers that regret was waiting either way. She remembers the feel of rope and wet hands, the burn that taught her what pain is for. She remembers smoke that would not listen to water, and the camera flash that made grief into a banner. Her back straightens. "I refuse," she says, not loud, not soft, just true. The word closes a life that never began. The fiancé's father sets his mouth hard and nods to the sheriff. The sheriff does not move. The fiancé exhales and looks past her, as if a photographer still waited. The cowboy's eyes shine like someone who has been forgiven for telling the truth. He doesn't smile. He doesn't speak. He only stands and lets her pass. She reaches the aisle and walks. The floor creaks. Dresses whisper. Boots shift. No one follows. She does not look back. She lets the ring stay in its box under church light, a small sun she will not orbit. She passes the pew where her brother once squirmed during hymns. She passes the window that threw afternoon squares on her knees. She passes the sheriff, who holds his ground and his breath. At the threshold she pauses, not to doubt, but to know. Then she walks down the aisle alone without looking. Gravel and ghosts, the chapel doors spit her into heat. Gravel crunches like bones. She hears something in the glare, her mother's voice or a well bucket banging metal. The land keeps old sounds alive. She stops at the bottom of the steps and lets the day press across her shoulders. The cowboy catches up. He does not touch her. "Come with me," he says. She keeps her eyes on the parking lot where trucks idle like tired cattle. "To what?" she asks. "Something true," he says. People spill from the chapel, hungry for an end. Dust tastes like iron. The fiancé and the sheriff follow, tight and calm. The father a few paces back like a wall that learned to walk. "You promised," the fiancé says, voice clean for the crowd. "I promised myself first," she says. "Promises have witnesses," the father answers. "So does harm," the cowboy says. The sheriff lifts a palm. "Let's talk, away from the crowd." "No," she says. "Let them hear." Wind lifts grit, without moving flags. "Come with me," the cowboy repeats, lower. "I will not hurt you." "You cannot promise the world," the fiancé says. "I can promise my part," the cowboy says. "Your part is small," the father says. "Small things save lives," she says. The sheriff studies the gravel. "We can settle this quiet," he says. "We have a room for that." "Your rooms have cameras," the cowboy says. "Your rooms have chairs," the father says. "Your rooms have locks," she says. Someone in the crowd calls, "Girl, mind your betters." She flinches, then hardens. "I have no betters," she says. "Only neighbors." "Come with me," the cowboy says again, soft as to a spooked mare. "There is a place past the feed road. No one will follow. They follow money," she says, "not tracks." He almost smiles. "Then we cut the creek." The fiancé steps closer. "You are not leaving with him. You are not leaving with anyone," the father adds. The sheriff says nothing, and that says plenty. She hears the well bucket in her head. Iron on stone, the sound of being pulled from a dark hole into a smaller light. "Breathe," the pastor says from the door. "Breathe and decide." She decided to shame herself, A man mutters. She decided to live, someone answers. The wind lays dust on her tongue. The cowboy tips his hat. I do not want to fight, he says. You did when you walked in there, the fiancé says. I fought for breath, the cowboy says. I fought for her. You fought for pride, the father says. You fought to stain a name. Names wipe clean if you own the store, she says. The sheriff steps so the badge finds more light. I am keeping this decent, he says. Do not force my hand. Your hand was bought, the cowboy says. The sheriff lets that pass. We will get statements, he says. We will note the threats. Note the fire, the cowboy says. The fiancé lifts his chin. We did not light anything. You lit a future you could control, she says. A flag rope knocks wood, but the flag does not lift. Heat wavers above the road. She thinks of the moonless night and the rope burns that took a week to fade. She thinks of her brother coughing while men wrote numbers on a clipboard. She thinks of a camera flash inside, a hug that felt like a trap. Choose now, the father says. Choose and mend this. I am not a tear, she says. I am a person. People marry, the father says. People leave, the cowboy says. People survive, the sheriff adds. She sees the ladder of men and the gap they keep for pretty wives who talk only in rooms. Come with me, the cowboy says. Please. The word is small and honest. To what? She asks again. Something true, he says, and hard. But yours. The fiancé steadies his tie. This is childish. This is mine, she says. A car door thuds far off. The sheriff rubs his eyes. Last time, he says. Step inside. Talk plain. No, she says. No more rooms. The pastor comes down the steps. Child, he says, you can come home with me and think. I cannot think under quilts, she says. I think driving. You cannot leave with him, the fiancé says. I am not asking, she says. She heads for the cars. Gravel crunches like bones. Come with me, the cowboy says, keeping pace. I am here, I know, she says. The father calls. You will regret this. Maybe, she says, but I will hear myself. The sheriff stays back. The fiancé matches her step and will not pass. Her hands shake and then go still. She reaches the old sedan that smells like rain. She opens the door and feels the hot seat grab her dress. In the rear view she sees her mother's mouth set in the same line. The world waits. She sits. The strap bites her shoulder. A car door slams. Hers, road dust. She drives with both hands tight, dust rising behind her. Mirrors fill with men in black suits and badges. The cowboy's truck falls in behind like a promise. The road knows where bones were buried, where money changed hands, where a girl said no, and a town sharpened its teeth. Heat shivers above the pavement, fences slide by, then fields that still smell burnt. She does not look back. She can feel the convoy breathing. The fiancé's sedan holds perfect distance. The sheriff's cruiser keeps steady. She thinks about ladders and the gap beneath them. She thinks about the well at her old house, the dark throat that once kept her. She turns off the main road and lets gravel take the car. The house waits with its windows half shut. Grass leans toward the drive. She parks by the mesquite stump her brother never dug out. Dust settles on the hood and stays. She kills the engine. A chain hits a gate. She steps out and the land remembers her shoes. The cowboy pulls in and leaves his truck running. The fiancé and the sheriff arrive, a breath later, dust blossoming, then thinning. She walks to the well, slow. Stones hold their old chill. The rope is frayed to hair. The bucket smells like iron. She leans over and feels the drop rise in her stomach. She is still the girl who fell. She is also the woman who refused. You ran here, the fiancé asks. I came home, she answers. To a hole in the ground. It's deeper than your pockets. Let's keep this careful, the sheriff says. The cowboy says, leave her. You don't give orders. The sheriff replies, then listen, the cowboy says. She's not a deal. She looks into the black and tries to catch the sky. It will not come down. Still falls, she says. Still no bottom. She picks a pebble and drops it. Quiet eats the second between them. Stop this, the fiancé says. Get in the car. No, she says. You promised. I promised myself. First, you promised me. I promised not to lie. That is what I am doing. The father's car arrives late. Bumper dusty. Glass clean. He steps out slow. Enough tourism, he says. Back in town we have rules. We have rules here too, she says. Water goes to the thirsty. Fire gets fought. Nobody poses while neighbors burn. We will talk one at a time, the sheriff says. Talk to the prince. On your badge, the cowboy says. You make me tired, the sheriff answers. Men who pay for trouble make you quiet, the cowboy says. The fiancé smooths his shirt and looks toward the charred field. I offered help, he says. You charged interest, she says. You took our pictures. We showed the world your need, he says. You came, the cowboy says. Wind lifts dust without moving the flag. Old sounds keep walking here. In her head, the bucket bangs metal. Her mother counts clothespins. Her brother laughs and then coughs. The word no stands. Come with me, the cowboy says, hands open. We can talk where the wind does not listen. She is not going anywhere with you, the fiancé says. She is going where she chooses, the cowboy answers. I will not say it again, the sheriff says. Calm. Calm is for people who slept, she says. I have not slept since the fire. The father walks to the well and stares like he expects profit. You have made a scene, he says. You have made us patient. Do not make us cruel. I don't scare easy at home, she says. Home is what we say it is. Not anymore, ma'am, the sheriff says. We can take statements in town. My statement is this, she says, touching stone. Here I was saved. Nobody billed me. Nobody staged a shot. The fiancé moves toward her and stops when the cowboy slides one boot, a line in dust. Do not make me prove who I am, the fiancé says. Do not make me forget who I am, she says. Enough. The sheriff tries. The word falls short. She picks another pebble. The first has not given itself away. Maybe the years swallowed it. She drops the second and listens. You see, the fiancé says. Nothing. Empty. It is not empty, she says. It is deep. Deep is just lost, he says. Deep is where I learned to want air, she says. Deep is where truth waits when money blocks the door. The cowboy adds, we are done, the sheriff says. Back to town. She shakes her head. You can go. We don't leave first, the father says. Then we wait, she says. They do. Sun holds. Road hum mutters. Dust settles on shoulders. The well breathes cool. At last the faintest sound climbs the stones. Thin and late, a secret loosening. The pebble splash reaches her like a yes. She closes her eyes and counts, slower, as if the well were a clock and listening could start it over. The well remembers. The well holds stories under stone. One of those stories is hers. She stands with dust on her lips and listens for the last ripple she made. The cowboy waits a step behind. The fiancé watches with his jaw tight. The sheriff studies the road like he's bored, but he isn't. His eyes keep circling back. The father's car ticks as it cools. The house leans like it knows when people choose wrong. She kneels and feels the stones with her fingers. They are rough and honest. She finds the loose one where a crack opens like a mouth. She presses her thumb, pries, and the rock shifts. Careful, the cowboy says. I am, she says, though her heart knocks. The stone comes free and leaves a small wound in the wall. A dark bundle sits in the hollow. A small packet wrapped in oilcloth slides free. It is palm-sized and slick with old grease. She holds it like a bird that might bite. The cowboy steps closer, still not touching. The fiancé edges forward, then stops when the sheriff tilts his head. The father stays by the hood like any dirt here could leap onto him. The dry rope swings. The bucket taps iron. "What's that?" the fiancé asks. "A truth," she says. The sheriff clears his throat as if to draw a line. The cowboy says, "You don't owe them. I owe myself," she says, opening it. Her nails slip. She pulls the knot with her teeth, and the cloth gives. The smell is iron and oil and a little mold, like work shut away too long. Inside lies a folded letter and a thin ring the color of old wheat. Her stomach drops. She heard the story, but never touched proof. The ring is simple, cheaper than hope. She knows it belonged to her mother before it went missing one summer night. The letter is tight with small slanted lines. Her name sits on the outside, blurred by damp. The fiancé lifts his chin. "To a hole in the ground," he says, "like the well is a joke. It's deeper than your pockets," she answers. The father says, "This disturbs the dead." "The dead were never safe from you," the cowboy says. The sheriff lifts 2 fingers. "Careful with old fire," he says. "Heat rises in her anyway." She lifts the letter with both hands. "Read it later," the fiancé says. "Come back to town." "No," she says. "Here, we should make a record," the sheriff says. "We will," she says. "With my voice." The cowboy nods. "Stand by me," she tells him, and he does. The father comes as far as the stones and stops. She opens the letter. The first line is a date from years before she was born. The second names her mother. The third names a meeting behind the church. Bell quiet, moon gone. The words run thin and fast. A man's hand, a promise, a debt, a threat, a second ring given and kept off books, a warning to hide what could not be spoken in town. "You lied," she says to the father. "Mind your tongue," the father says. His thumb rubs his ring like it remembers other vows. "My mother had to," she snaps. "All her life." The fiancé shifts. "This is beneath us," he says. "It's beneath you," the cowboy says. "It's under everything," she says. The sheriff stops pretending to be bored. She reads another line, and her breath goes short. The letter says the deal for water rights was sealed with a quiet ceremony and a second ring. It says the promise to marry was broken when money found a better path. It names 3 men as witnesses and warns of silence to be bought and kept. It signs with the father's name and a flourished hook he still uses on checks. Her hands tremble but do not let go. "False," the father says. "Forgery. Your flourish doesn't forget itself," she says. "Any fool can copy a mark," the fiancé says. "Then why does the ink smell like our barn?" the cowboy asks. The sheriff steps forward. "Let me see," he says. "You can see from there," she says. He nods, as if distance is the first honest act left. Wind carries a smell of rain that will not arrive. The shutters tick. A dog barks once and quits. She closes the ring into her fist and keeps the letter open. The well remembers the splash of secrets and the scrape of rope. So does she. "Say it," she tells the father. He looks past her, the way men look past fences they plan to cut. "Truth doesn't stop at your boots," the cowboy says. The sheriff's jaw tightens. The fiancé's smile fails. She lifts the letter so the sun can read it too, and the paper shines. The oilcloth letter lies open in her hands, waiting for the first sentence to be spoken into air that can finally hold it. She holds it open and breathes, ready to read. The letter and the brand. The paper warms in her hands, while noon turns the yard flat. The sheriff's badge throws a stripe on the well stones. Names sit on the page like wire. The fiancé steps forward, shaken. The father steps back, calculating. The cowboy studies the margin where a brand covers a sketched bruise. She reads. The letter names the men who met behind the church. Bell quiet, moon gone. It names a promise, a hand, a debt paid in silence. It describes a hush envelope stamped with the family crest. It says the past did not leave. She made this up, the father says. She never lied. She replies. The sheriff tries for calm. Allegations aren't proof. The brand is, the cowboy says. He rolls up his sleeve and shows a pale scar in the same hooked shape. You did that, he tells the father. Then sue me, the father says. She shakes her head. No, I will show them. Show who? Everyone. The fiancé looks at the crest in the corner, then at the father. Tell me you did not, he says. We brand cattle, the father says, not people. You brand what you think you own, the cowboy says. We own our land. We keep our peace, the father says. You kept silence, she says. You bought it when you could. You burned it when you could not. She reads more. The letter records her mother's night, a bruise dark as coal, the brand set above it to bury talk. It lists 3 witnesses and what each was promised. It says the sheriff then took a board seat the next week. It says a second ring changed hands that same night. No church, no book, no song. Old pain should not rule new days, the fiancé says. Old pain already rules yours, she says. Let me hold the letter, the sheriff says. You can listen, she says. The page stays with me. The father tells the crowd, forgery. Anyone can draw a mark and claim a wound. Not anyone, the cowboy says. You need heat and a man who thinks he owns the day. She reads the line about the safe and the key. The wax that smelled like oil. The bill total. The note that said this ends it. Be grateful. It ends with a warning to hide the record in the well, if help never came. It never came, she says. The fiancé steps closer to her, not to the letter. I did not know, he says. She believes it, and knows it does not save him. You would do smaller harms if told, the cowboy says. Mind your place, the father says. You taught me mine with heat, the cowboy says. We are not trying a case in a yard, the sheriff says. We are showing a town what it let itself become, she says. She lifts the letter so the sun bites each word. My mother wrote that if the sheriff would not help, she would save proof for me, she says. You bring shame on good men, the father says. Good men do not brand, she says. Boys fight and lie, the father says. Men own their marks, the cowboy says. A truck idles at the gate. More faces gather. We can handle this quiet, the fiancé says. We will make a fund. We will fix the harm. You cannot buy back a bruise under a brand, she says. I can apologize, he says. Then choose different than your father, she says. You think a letter ends a name built over years, the father says. Names end in a day when truth sticks, the cowboy says. The sheriff studies the crest. I know that seal, he says. Everyone knows it, she says. We walked past it to pay fines. Watch yourself, the father tells the sheriff. I am, the sheriff says. She turns the page so the margin shows. The brand looks fresh. The bruised sketch sits under it, like a shadow that would not heal. Let me see the back, the sheriff says. Later, she says. I have to do something first. The father steps, as if to grab. The cowboy moves between. You heard us when you walked out, the father says. You heard us when you walked in with matches, she says. The fiancé says her name, small. She does not look. She opens her phone. The glass shows her eyes, the paper, the scar. Do not, the father says. Please think, the sheriff says. I have, she says. The cowboy nods. The yard stills. She lifts the camera and fills it with the letter, the crest, the brand, the date, the names. She takes the photo. The day freezes long enough for truth to fit inside it. In the screen she sees the crest and the hooked mark, dates and names, and behind them the sheriff, the father, the cowboy, and a bright strip of sky. It is all there, proof and witnesses. Held by her hands in a small square of glass. Bell badge. Broadcast. Her thumb shakes as she frames the paper in the phone and hits send. The post lifts off and settles over town like dust. Phones buzz at the feed store, by the river bend, along the chapel steps. The bell rings again for no reason. Power blinks. The day's hum drops a note. When the truth moves, buildings listen. She stands by the well with the letter and feels the ground remember. The fiancé steps forward, face pale. Delete it, he whispers. Marry me clean, she says. Or not at all. I am clean. Then why are you sweating? He looks at his father and then away. The father's phone keeps lighting. He turns his back and calls a lawyer. The sheriff taps his radio twice, old code for trouble, and scans the road. The cowboy watches the screens in people's hands. Cars roll up and idle. People from the chapel gather by the fence with phones held like shields. The bell keeps ringing without hands, each strike a little late, as if memory tugs the rope. Folks, keep back, the sheriff says. This is over, not yet, she says. The fiancé tries to smile. We can talk alone, no crowds, she says. I am done hiding my life. I never touched you wrong. You touched my choices. That is worse in a slow way. I knew none of this. You knew the price of my yes. He reaches as if for her wrist, then stops. The cowboy shifts. Pick your side, rich boy. The fiancé blinks. I pick her, he says, shaky. The father turns, phone to his ear. Don't speak without counsel. Counsel can wait, the fiancé says. She cannot. Power winks again, and screens glow and dim. She thinks of the rope once around her waist, and the bell rope now, and how both can pull a body out or down. The sheriff steps between her and the father. Everybody breathe. We'll take statements at the station. Stations kept the secret, the cowboy says. Stations kept the peace, the sheriff answers. Peace paid a fee, she says. A widow from choir says her name and crosses herself. A ranch hand lifts his cap and puts it on again. The father's lawyer speaks through the speaker, thin and cold. Do not engage. Instruct her to remove the material. We will file. File on my mother, she says. File on her bones. File on slander, the voice replies. The cowboy laughs once. Truth can't slander. Truth without proof is wind, the voice says. She holds up the letter and the phone. Proof enough to start. Delete it, the fiancé whispers again. Marry me clean, she repeats. Or not at all. I am clean, he says, weaker. Then stop sweating, the cowboy says. Sirens scratch faint at the far edge of town, not fast, a straight hungry line. Ambulance? The sheriff asks. Security, the cowboy says. The father pockets his phone and studies the road. They will clear this. They will restore order. Order means shut up, she says. Order means sit down, the cowboy adds. Order means pay first, the fiancé says, almost to himself. He looks at her. I can do different. Then start, she says. Stand here without lying. He nods and wipes his forehead. Across the fence a boy films with nervous hands. A deputy pulls up and parks crooked, then straightens the car. The bell rings again, a late echo for a wedding that did not happen. The crowd falls quiet, as if someone just spoke a prayer nobody remembers. The father steps nearer. Delete it and we will make you whole. Whole like my mother was whole, she says. Whole like a wall with a secret inside. The fiancé flinches. I did not know, he says again. You looked away for practice, the cowboy says. Learn to look, she tells the fiancé. The sheriff lifts his radio. Units, hold until I call. Crowd stable. Crowd is awake, she says. Awake turns ugly, the father says. Awake turns fair, she says. Power blinks, off and on. She opens the live view and the number climbs. Names she knows scroll past, words that sting and bless. Some want her to stop, some want more names. Some ask if the sheriff knew. She looks at the man with the badge. Did you? He holds her stare. I knew pieces. I wanted things to stay stitched. Stitches hold until skin rejects thread, she says. He nods once. I can still do my job. Do it, the cowboy says. I am, the sheriff answers, and wishes it were true. Down the road a first glint of lights appears, steady and small. The sirens grow a shade louder. When they arrive, put the phone away, the father says. When they arrive, stand still, she says. When they arrive, tell the truth, the cowboy says. The fiancé touches the phone case. If I stand with you, we build back, he says. We build honest, or not at all, she says. He swallows and nods. Delete it. The father tries one more time. Save yourself. She looks at the well and the house and the line of dust. I already started, she says. She started a fire, the father tells the sheriff. I see smoke, the sheriff says, but it is not from her. It is from you, the cowboy says. Phones chime again. The bell stutters, then swings clean, finding a beat as if the rope remembers its work. Power steadies. She breathes and tastes iron. I am done being quiet, she says. I am not a headline. I am a person who remembers. The cowboy stands close, not touching. The fiancé stands beside her, shaking eyes on the road. The father waits. The sheriff's radio crackles, dies, returns. He taps it twice and squares his shoulders. The bell answers with a tired swing, one that sounds like breath. People edge back from the well and then press forward again, as if the ground itself were a witness. The sheriff wipes his brow and sets his hat lower. The father fixes his tie like armor. The fiancé straightens beside her and does not move. Dust lifts, hangs, settles, and waits. The cowboy does not look. In the near distance, sirens swell and keep swelling until the difference is clear. Not the cry of help, but the steady teeth of company security trucks coming for silence with lights that do not comfort. Storm-glass men in suits step out, the kind who move like walls. Their trucks line the road with lights that do not comfort. The sheriff nods once. All the lines are drawn. The well reflects faces, hers, the cowboy's, the fiancé's, the badge, the father's cold eyes. Heat presses the yard flat. The first drop of rain hits the letter and blooms a dark coin. They spread without hurry. A suited man says her name like a document. The father stands near him. The fiancé shifts and swallows. The cowboy plants his boots. The sheriff sets his feet. Name your price, the father says. She breathes, slow. This isn't a store, she replies. Dad, stop, the fiancé says. You stop, the father snaps. We are past kindness. The sheriff raises a hand. I need that letter for evidence. You'll bury it, the cowboy says. I'll lock it, the sheriff answers. Same grave, she says. The suited man lifts a palm. Last chance, miss. First chance I've ever had, she says. Rain freckles dust. The bell in town rings a tired echo. She folds the letter into her dress, close to her heart, and the paper warms like it belongs there. Do not resist, the suited man says. Do not touch her, the cowboy answers. Stand aside, the father orders. Stand up, she tells herself. The sheriff breathes. Folks, easy. She speaks to the crowd because she has learned fear grows in secret. You saw the post, she says. You can read. This was done before I was born, and it keeps happening. A widow nods. A ranch hand mutters a prayer he forgot. The fiancé wipes his brow. I will help fix it, he says. Then hold still, she answers. The cowboy's voice is steady. Truth is not a brawl. It is a door. The father laughs once, like a bad knock. Door's close, he says, not on me. A suit steps nearer. Ma'am, the letter? The sheriff shades his eyes. I can take custody. You can take responsibility, she says. Keep it public. The cowboy adds, badge first, safe second. The sheriff nods, tired. I can read it at the station. Read it here, she says. In the rain, the father scoffs. In the light, she answers. Lightning scratches the horizon like a pen. People flinch. Power in the trucks hums, then steadies. The well shows the sky as broken glass. She thinks of the night with no moon, and the rope that burned her skin, and the boy who would not let her slip. She thinks of the chapel bell that rang without hands, like it remembers vows better than men do. Name your price, the father repeats, softer, almost kind. A fund, a school, a new well, a confession, she says. And a charge. The sheriff looks at her. That is a path with stones. I know how to walk, she says. The fiancés again. Please, talk to me alone. Talk is a room where secrets grow, she says. No more rooms. The cowboy nods. Let the rain hear. The suit checks his watch. Time. The sheriff squares himself. Nobody moves on her. Deputies arrive late and form a crooked line that wants to be straight. The father studies them like pieces on a board he means to own. Boys, he says, think of your mortgages. One deputy looks at his boots. Another looks at the phone feeds. None step forward. She turns the letter in her bodice and feels the edge. This is mine, she says. It was my mother's. It is our town's. It will not vanish because trucks arrived. The suited man lifts a finger toward the cowboy. Stand down. The cowboy's jaw sets. You want me to watch while you erase her? We enforce property, the suit says. We defend people, the cowboy answers. The sheriff says her name quiet, steady. I need the page. She shakes her head. I have been paper my whole life. Today, I am ink. A fine rain starts, soft and honest. The letter prints a damp shape against her dress. The crowd leans in. The widow in gray speaks first. Let her read, she says. Others follow, rough voices that do not match yet hold. The father stiffens. You listen to anger, he says. At last, she says. The fiancé steps to her side, a choice that trembles in his legs. He faces the suits. She stays. The sheriff studies the father. Sir, if you interfere, I will arrest you. On what? The father says. On enough, the sheriff answers. The cowboy smiles without humor. Pick your ground. The suited man taps his earpiece and frowns at whether he cannot buy. Lightning pops the far ridge. The smell of rain fills the yard. She stands with the letter over her heart and the well at her back. She is not a headline. She is a voice that will not step off the road. Last chance, the suit warns again. First chance, she repeats. Thunder rolls once behind the ridge. The crowd listens, and I'm taking it. Bonfire of the quiet rain turns to a sheet that steals the far fence. She drags a steel washtub from the porch, sets it under the awning, and lights a small fire to dry the letter's edge, not burn it. Flames reflect in the well. The town gathers in the road, faces wet, waiting. The suits cluster under hoods. The sheriff looks smaller in the rain. The cowboy stays near her shoulder without touching. The fiancé's back, pale. Women step forward, store clerks, choir singers, ranch hands' daughters. One sets down a flour sack to free both hands. Another tucks hair that rain lays flat again. They edge around the tub, steam lifting like old words. I remember, one woman says. Me too, another says. The father snorts. Lies? Then why does it hurt? She asks him. His jaw jumps. The fiancé tries. I didn't know. Knowing starts now, she says. The cowboy says, stand with us. The sheriff wipes his face. Put out that fire. She cups the flame with her palm. No. Rain needles her wrist and the little blaze hisses but holds. She feeds it cedar shavings. The letter's corner dries and curls, ink steady. She keeps it high and turns it slow. A store clerk speaks. When I was 16, someone followed me from the mill. He told me to hush because my daddy owed favors. A choir singer says, they called me pretty when they meant quiet. A ranch hand's daughter says, my mother kept our gate locked while the cows were out. The father lifts his hands. Enough performance, enough pretending, she answers. A suit steps in. Ma'am, the document. The truth isn't a document, the cowboy says. It's a room with the door open. The sheriff shifts stance. I have to keep order. Order is why we're wet, a widow says. Order made us wait. Lightning cracks close. The crowd flinches, but stays. She lowers the letter toward the warmth and lifts it again, watching dry meat fire. Careful, the fiancé whispers. She nods without looking. A girl from the feed store lifts her chin. They fired me when I wouldn't sit for a picture with their donation check, an older woman says. They paid my husband to keep quiet about the spill. Another says, I was told I smiled too much. The sheriff's radio spits and dies. Folks, we can't stand here forever. We stood here for years. A woman answers. The father steps closer to the tub and sneers at the flames. This is childish. This is a bonfire of the quiet, she says. It's small so truth doesn't roar. It works, he points at the cowboy. You stoke this to ruin us. I stoke it to see, the cowboy says. The fiancé rubs his temples. Dad, stop. You stop, the father snaps. Stop choosing weather over walls. Rain drums the awning. She turns the letter, checks the edges. Her mother's script stands up in strokes that won't wash away. A woman from the choir steps close. I remember, she says again. We were told to forgive in advance. Another says, me too. Forgive and forget is a trick. A third says, I brought my girl to see me not flinch. The sheriff plants by the porch post. Put out that fire. She cups the flame with both hands. A lean wind. No. A suited man lifts his phone. You're interfering. I'm preserving, she says. A boy in a soaked jacket edges forward. My aunt says the same men who sell fences steal calves at night. A deputy glares, then looks away. The fiancé says, I didn't know. He says it to the women this time. Knowing starts now. She tells him again. The cowboy says, stand with us. He nods, smaller than a promise, larger than silence. More women step in. The circle tightens. Shoulders touch. Rain streaks cheeks. They face the suits, the father, the badge. The fire keeps a low tongue in the tub, the letter's edge drying clean. The sheriff looks smaller in the rain, hat low. He tries again. Ma'am, the fire. It's legal, the cowboy says. It's righteous, she says. It's dangerous, the father snaps. It's watched, she answers. By everyone. Lightning opens the ridge and shuts again. The well throws a brief, bright window, then goes black. She hears her mother's name in the rain, or maybe her own. She finds the sentence where the brand is drawn. She will read it when the paper is ready, not before. Think of the town, the father says. I am, she says. That's why we're outside. A suit mutters into his cuff. A deputy shifts. The cowboy breathes slow. The fiancé holds still, because stillness is work. Women step forward again, tighter now, shoulder to shoulder. One repeats, I remember. Another, me too. The father barks, lies. She asks him, then why does it hurt? He looks away. The sheriff, put out that fire, a voice mocks from the road. The sheriff, tired, says it himself. Put out that fire. She cups the flame. No. The women form a circle, shoulders touching, the letter drying above a humble blaze. Rain eases to a hush over tin and leaves. The quiet they used to carry lifts like steam and goes up. The town watches and waits for dawn to whisper at the line of the world, the wedding that wasn't. Rain slackens but the air holds heavy, the yard wet with footsteps and silence. No chapel, no organ. She stands at the tub, the letter safe against her chest, the ring box closed and damp on the porch rail. The crowd waits in the road. The cowboy stands near, steady, not touching. The fiancé steps back, hearing his own heartbeat for the first time. The sheriff's badge dims, no shine left in it. The father lowers his gaze, as if weight finally pressed through. She walks to the well. Stones glisten. She ties the letter with fresh cord, lowers it into the throat, then pulls it back, her choice, not the town's. She holds it high, so water drips into the mud. The women step close. Scarves come off heads and necks, tied with quick knots, then hung on the sheriff's radio antenna like flags. Color runs in rain, a banner no law ordered. The sheriff watches, smaller in wet clothes. Deputies shift but do nothing. I am not for sale, she says. Neither am I, the fiancé answers. He faces his father. I'm done, the father says. You'll die poor, maybe I'll live honest, the fiancé says. The sheriff clears his throat. What do you want? She steadies. Account of every story you buried, the cowboy says. We'll dig. She turns to him. I see you. He nods. I'll be here. A hush swells under the awning. The widow, who spoke first, crosses herself and lifts her chin. A girl from the feed store clutches her mother's sleeve. Faces hold steady against the storm. She feels her mother close, in the wet stone, in the ink that did not run, in the voice that carried her here. The father removes his hat. For once, he has no words. The sheriff lets his radio hang loose. Suits wait, but the crowd has shifted. Power is not theirs tonight. The cowboy breathes slow, eyes never leaving hers. The fiancé stays still, his father's shadow no longer covering him. She places the letter back inside her dress. She walks to the well again and sets the ring box on the stone lip. Her fingers close it with care. She leaves it there. The bell rope in town hangs still. The badge on the sheriff's chest is only metal again. The circle of women loosens, but the bond holds. Rain eases. Dawn whispers at the edge of the world. She smiles. Not for any man, but for the ground that finally answers back.